Hello everyone and welcome to our second video in our WTC special series. I am here with Josh Gigantor Bates. Josh, how you going today?
Great, man. Just real chill day.
That's good. That's exactly what you want, especially going into a massive tournament like the WTC. Um, but you're this is the first time you've been on this channel, so give us a bit of a background. How did you get into hobby? Who are you? Who is Gigantor?
I really liked the models, and my parents bought me a sort of the Dark Elder Warriors back in like 1998 or 97, whenever they first came out. Um, and then I just painted them up with like poster paint and just did this horrible job on them. And then the third edition box, like I made friends with a whole bunch of guys at school who were playing Warhammer. And I just wanted to like talk to people about painting the models. And then they all started to give me the Dark Elder Warriors out of the box set for the third edition starter set for 40k. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just grew like massive Dark Elder army, played it for several years, basically up until I started playing War Machine, which was 5th edition 40k was released, and it just didn't jive with me.
Yep.
So I War Machine started to really take off, and it's such a hook. Like the game was just so precise, so tactically deep, and it feels like no matter how much I play, even now, I still have this huge well of just tactical knowledge that I am missing in the game.
Mm.
And yeah, I want to keep digging at that. So it's kept me going for well over 10 years now. And
Yeah, very nice. So,
I
like,
really, really got into the painting.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's it. You're an excellent painter. So anyone who is a any locals in Southeast Queensland or even any Australians will know Josh for some of his beautifully painted armies over the course of the years. But your main love for most of the time that I've known you has been Signar. So what draws you to Signar over all the other factions?
Yeah, well, originally I was really drawn to Crix actually.
Oh, okay.
But I played Dark Eldar for so long in 40k that I just went, you know what, Crix is too much like Dark Eldar. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. So these Signar dudes kind of like look a bit Space Marine in some of the ways. I was so used to playing this like glass hammer type faction where I hit hard and fast, but I just get shattered into oblivion if I get hit back. And so I jumped onto Signar, and turns out they play exactly the same as Dark Elder did. Um, and the way I played them in particular.
Yeah.
But they had this a lot of. I just found more I got into that like really pretty blue aesthetic and having all that kind of the World War One trencher theme and
Mm.
then the Storm Knights in the same faction. And because the game, even back at the start of Mark II, was so big, it just like I never felt like I was getting good enough at any of the casters or anything, or kind of just like one faction in this game encompasses enough that you don't need to go and buy multiple factions, even though I now own pretty much everything in the game. Um, yeah, I enjoyed how Signar had this like they were always trying to play keep away, and you just kind of shaved off a little bit of what your opponent did, and then like danced backwards a little bit. And you didn't want to get hit too hard and too fast, and you wanted to keep the control on the table, but in such interesting different ways.
Yeah, okay. So really kind of like setting the tempo of the game and just maintaining that, forcing them to play your game instead of them being able to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and it comes back to like if there's an old Magic the Gathering article called "Who's the Beatdown," and it's by one of the previous World Championships. It's like go have a read of it if you haven't. And talks a lot about misidentifying who the aggressor and who the defender is in every situation. So even though like I might be playing a more aggressive game in certain parts of the like the macro game, I have to be a defender in that section there. And so like identifying just broadly in any game who the aggressor and who the defender is huge. But then identifying each little situation that can fall down across a table is just a massive thing. And the way I've generally approached games is I want to make my opponent feel like they're in the wrong position. So the way I would beat players who were better than me at the time is I'd put them in situations where they felt like they would beat down and they came in too aggressively and then too late realized. that they were actually should be defending at that point in time, and just like overcommitted and just made them overextend and overcommit is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And you
Okay.
can do that. Yeah, I think bucking expectations in any game is probably one of my favorite ways to play it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's definitely a bit of a deep dive into your backstory. Most people just kind of waffle on about themselves for a minute or two, but that's awesome. Like you've been involved with the hobby for majority of the time that I've been a part of it as well. I don't think I can actually remember going to a tournament and you not being there unless you were at a different tournament. Um, I
There
think it'd be
was
the
the
only time.
like 6 months I had broken legs in hospital. So
I think even then, it wouldn't surprise me if you still managed to make it to a tournament. Um,
yeah, I was rocking up to tournaments in a wheelchair.
yeah, yeah. So the reason that I've got Josh on with me is because he is the captain of the Blue Ring Octopus team that's going to the WTC. And what I wanted to talk to him about was basically a bit more of a deeper look at the matchup process and the meta and how that works in a massive team tournament like the WTC. So a lot of people who are watching this have probably been to a tournament before already, and they're familiar with the basic matchup process. Two lists. You pick your list. You've got your table. You've got your scenario. But adding in five other players on your opponent's team and four other players on your team dramatically shifts how the matchup process works. And as one of the most experienced team kind of event players that Australia has, I've got Josh on to kind of walk us through how that looks like at a world class event like the WTC. So let's start it out. Walk me through the matchup process.
Okay, so what I'll do, I'll point out some differences because I know you've got a lot of Age of Sigmar and 40k people who pay attention to this kind of stuff. So 40k WTC is 8-man teams, and AOS WTC I believe is 6-man teams. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I I think that's I think it's actually 8-man teams as well.
Okay, so War Machine uses because our countbacks and the way the game's scored, you have to have an uneven number, otherwise it doesn't work for War Machine. Because we don't win on a points-based system, so you don't get like this many extra points. So having uneven numbers is the key to it, but also makes the matchup process really tricky. So when you've got 5-man teams, you've got some kind of disadvantage because often whoever picks the second last matchup, by virtue of that, will pick the last matchup.
Yeah.
So the first way you have to do that is that's balanced out by whoever's not picking the matchup at that point in time is picking the table.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what you do is you roll off. The team will either choose to put down a player first, or they'll choose to receive two matchups. So what will happen is the team who loses the roll off often puts down one of their players, and the other team will put down two players, and the person who put down the single player sheet will choose the matchup there, and then the player who was a part of that team who put down the two sheets or the two matchups that they choose into, they get to go choose a table.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then that keeps happening until you've got the last two players. So the people who choose the last two matchups choose two tables. The other team chooses three tables and two matchups. Is effectively how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's either you're selecting three tables or three matchups.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
and I
So
think this is the most interesting year so far because previously the way it was run was um, the people who are selecting the last two matchups don't select any tables. So it was more advantageous a lot of the time to select less matchups. You get to really manipulate the matchup process by selecting tables which are more advantageous to the individual pairs. And now it's super interesting. It's kind of like 50-50.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's awesome that they've come up with a process that basically there is no kind of general consensus that this is the right answer. If you win the role, this is what you do. It literally comes down to how your matrix looks for the opposing team, what the tables look like, what the scenarios are like, and everything is involved, and you've got to make that decision on the fly, which is really good to hear. So as part of that matchup process, previously you guys have do all your homework and go through and rate all the other lists at the event. I know we've done it previously when we've been on teams together. And how that works is you go through and you rate everyone from a green to a red. Green meaning you're pretty solidly going to win it. Red means you're pretty solidly going to lose it. So that overall process then influences how your matchups work. But that ranking system is based on the meta. And as one of Australia's best players, Josh has a deep understanding of that meta. So walk us through at the moment, how does that meta look like? Because I've been out of the game for a bit, so I'm not 100% sure what's good, what's not.
It's super awkward because the game is so balanced. It's kind of crazy. There's no one list per faction, and there's like 15 factions in the game now. So there's no right way to play each faction, and everyone, like within each faction, you've got so many different armies that you can play. And because the other thing which really throws a spanner into the works is War Machine runs a two-list system. So every player has two lists selected for that army. And then what you do is you go to the table and then you say, I'm going to play, like you secretly select a list and then you reveal at the same time. And then you start by rolling off to see which side of the table you want. So in each individual matchup process in a tournament system, it's so varied in that because you aren't just saying, I'm playing against this. You've got a metagame inside of that, and it depends on how you've decided to approach this. So this comes into like, do I play question and answer lists? So some teams will play one all-comers list in their pair, and then like one really skewed list where they're like, if you cannot beat my skewed list, I'm playing my skewed list, and you just flat out lose. And so that's one approach to it. Other teams will say, okay, I've got one, maybe two totally skewed pairs that are really, really hard to answer, but if you answer them, they're kind of crap. Or other teams will just skew really hard, depending on how it is. And because there's several different ways to win a War Machine, some people will skew a whole team towards, let's say, assassination is one of the ways to win. So it very much depends on where everyone's sitting and all of that. So like Legion of Everlight has this really, really strong gun platform on top of having like all their ogres and everything. Like they have a whole ogre army, which is just hits like a truck and is hard to get rid of. So they're really interesting because you can play both of them as your list pair. There's no one who's really on the bottom at the moment. Like Signar's a bit lacking. They've got really only a few lists they can play, and none of them are really worth it. But apart from them, I'd say everyone has just like this huge variety of choices, and it's a bit overwhelming because you've never seen it in the game like this before. Every other year, it's been, oh yeah, I just play like, here's what we expect from every different faction, and there's 2 or 3 lists at most. Now there's like 6 lists from every faction. It's really difficult to even gauge where people were going to be. So the way we chose to approach it is we took some stuff we were really comfortable with to play just generally, and we thought would do well for us as players, and we chose to rely less on skewy matchups and skewy ways we're approaching the game and more on us as players. And saying that, there is 1 or 2 skewy lists in our matchup process to really throw people.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, you can't give them an easy run of it if you just got all kind of simple lists there. You got to make it complicated for them.
Yeah, but even that, if you've just got stuff, you're like, here's my all-comers list that also deals really well with like heavy armor, or here's my all-comers list that deals really well with troops as well. And if you've got them paired together, that's how that kind of works. There's a lot of really interesting stuff this year. Like Kador's been the big boogeyman with the new Karchev coming out.
Yep.
I was surprised at how much Scorn is at this event, and those lists are actually really scary.
Yeah, okay.
And it's quite varied. So we thought it would be like a few people playing Scorn, and just didn't even see the fact that there's a huge amount of players in Europe who are really repping Scorn hard.
Yeah, okay. So that's really interesting. So, has there been a kind of a leaning towards the either the War Machine or the Horde side of the factions?
It's, it looks fairly even. I haven't done the numbers, but like I said, everything's in a really good spot. Like on the pie chart, I think it's all pretty even. There's a higher tendency to some factions, like Circle Orboros has a really they're in quite a good place at the moment. They have quite a large representative, as well as Legion. They also have quite a big representative amount of people for them at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic point for the game to kind of be to ending on, which is unfortunate. But to get a game where at the top level all of the lists are kind of comparable, you've got top players like yourself that you literally can't pick what is the one top list. There's no obvious answer. There's no obvious better lists and all no obvious worse ones. That speaks to an incredible amount of balance, an incredible amount of work that the guys at Privateer Press have done to get the game to this state. Um, for your team, without going into too many details, because I think we've got a couple of people who'll be watching this to try and get some secret tech. How does the meta kind of look for your team? You said that you've got a couple of really skewy lists in there, but most of you are running kind of your safe, comfortable. These are your just good, solid lists that you've been playing for a while. How does that expand out and look overall to the meta? Like, how does your matchup matrices look?
Yeah, so we've done it a little bit differently. So we just had every team with their pairing there, and we've had a brief skim over in a chat about the lists, and we've just given each one of our lists against their individual lists percentage rating, and then we put a star next to whichever one we think is the actual one they're going to play.
Yeah, okay.
And so by that, depending on our matchup process and how it should look, we want to come out closer to 50-50s across the board because we're pretty confident in our play. It, like for me, I've taken two pretty all-comers lists, which are just generally like well balanced across the board. But I know I'm a fairly good player, so it's one of those things that I'm not too worried about someone outplaying me with a skew. And then we've got Brian's playing Karchev 2, which is one of the most, again, annoying, like heavy armor skews, which also just asks like really interesting questions. Yeah, I, we've taken some interesting list choices, but again, it's all fairly like it's all within our wheelhouse and what we wanted to play.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Because yeah, yeah, no, like that's good. Like I know stereotypically, the previous times that I've been to the WTC, Australia has kind of brought more unique lists compared to a lot of the rest of the world. Whether that's because we've got kind of our own little separate meta that's boiling over here, without all of the kind of the cross contamination you could call it from all the other countries and Europe, and the states. So I know that's always been interesting. So were a lot of your lists, did you see similar things coming up from other people, or did you see, or do you kind of like you've got your own kind of unique twists and your own personalized tastes to the lists?
oh, we've definitely got a unique twists to the lists in the way. Like I've done a fair bit of playtesting. I didn't do the war room thing as much as most people did. Um, I feel like a lot of people ignore Australia for most of the time, unless you're James Morehouse, and then people actually listen to you. But I've seen a lot of because of the way and the because of the way James plays and his influence in the world, in the War Machine world, that is, he I've seen a lot of carbon copies of his list because he's been quite open about exactly what he's playing the whole time.
Yeah, okay.
I'm seeing a lot of people who went, I'm too scared of like Karchev. I'm seeing a lot of pairs like it looks like Canadians have all skewed one of their lists really heavily to beat the new Karchev, but haven't made a good pair, for example. So
Yeah, so
that
kind of an example of the boogeyman in the meta, just kind of
yeah,
skewing how the lists are designed.
yeah. definitely. I feel like we've definitely got a good, unique flavor on our team, and I feel like the other teams do as well. Like Chris Davies' pair is super interesting, and I'm really happy that I won't have to play against it unless we're playing in the finals. Because forget that.
Yeah, well, that is the dream. Two Australian teams in the finals. So we haven't managed it yet, but this might be the year.
Yeah, probably. We'll see. I think France is in a really good position this year. They've been really pushing it hard the last few years, and they've got some really killer teams, as well as Poland always puts on a good show.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's going to definitely be a very interesting tournament. So, what like is there any one particular thing that you're looking forward to about the next WTC?
This coming one, sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the people. I wouldn't be still playing the game if it wasn't for the people involved. Traveling so much and just making all these friends all over the world has just been the most amazing thing. Like I'm flying into Warsaw in about a week's time before I head out and go to the WTC itself, just to go spend time with a bunch of my friends from when I was living over there. But you just meeting these people who you probably wouldn't have met or had any reason to even socialize with outside of some silly toy soldier games has been the biggest part of any wargaming experience, because I've made these really interesting friends in every different walk of life because of it, and that's the best part of the game, is just the people.
Yep, yeah. And that is one thing that I hear consistently with most people that I talk with, that it doesn't matter how good the game is, it's the people that makes or breaks any game system. And I can count on, I can't even count on one hand. I'm struggling to even think of people that I've met playing War Machine that I wouldn't want to play again or go out for a drink with. So,
Yeah, I've had like two bad experiences in games in War Machine in over the last decade, and I've played a lot.
mm,
So
yeah, that's a fantastic like strike rate for good games. So, because you would be averaging probably 3 or 4 games a month at least.
nowadays, yeah, but when I was playing a lot, I'd probably play 50 games a month.
That's just absolutely insane. So
Yeah,
that is the dream. So
but life takes over, and you can't just be a full-time nerd. It doesn't pay well enough.
well, that is the age-old thing: is how do you make a small fortune running a game store? You start with a large fortune and you open a game store.
Yeah, definitely.
So we know what keeps you in the hobby is the people, but do you have any tips or any advice for people who are looking to get into the hobby, apart from just go out, make friends, play games?
Yeah, I think this applies in every wargaming sense. Like, if your friends are interested in playing a game, don't go and play a different game just because you like the look of it better. Like Henry said, it's one of those things that, like, if your friends are playing it and you're enjoying it, just play what you enjoy and you'll just get better at it naturally. I don't think there's any better way to do it. Like, if you're a competitive freak like me, where like, I came into War Machine with no real friends, but I made a lot of friends in the game because it's a good game and there's a good bunch of people playing it, and there still is. And I think the rejuvenation with the new edition is going to really push a lot of this ahead. I I really think if you're just playing what your friends play, but if you are looking at making friends and getting into a new hobby, like if you play Warhammer and you want to play War Machine because you like the rule set better, jump across and just find what you enjoy, find what you like the look of, and however you want to play that way. Because if you don't play the way you want to play and you're trying to force yourself into a bubble to get better, if you're not having fun, you're not going to get better. It's just like learning anything. Like, if you're having fun learning it, it doesn't feel like you're learning. It doesn't feel like you're actively trying hard at practicing. It's like me. I go to the gym, and I don't go to the gym because it'll make me bulky or whatever. I go to the gym because I enjoy it. Go to the gym because it's a way I peace out and just relax. And it's the same with War Machine. I enjoy playing games. I enjoy the puzzle. I enjoy the interactivity. Like, it's the best way to get better is just to actually enjoy it. Don't do something you don't enjoy.
Yeah, and that's I wholeheartedly agree with that advice. If you don't enjoy something, you're not going to get better at it, no matter how much you try. You're just going to be bashing your head against a brick wall, and that's just going to stop you from really achieving what you want to be able to do. So, you did mention just before that you think the new edition of the game is going to see a bit of a resurgence of it. Can you elaborate a little bit further about what you think about the new edition?
Yeah, sorry, just spinning out there with my camera. Yeah, I think they've just made it easier and more straightforward. I actually, the one of the most, I don't know how I put it, one of the most divisive parts of it is the new movement system for units. But I also think that's probably one of the best changes. I really enjoy it. I think a lot of it will. It's a different tactical puzzle. It goes from being this like really in depth, like over the top, like not that you have to untie with War Machine Mark 3 or 2, to being this more like positioning and movement based game instead of like just trying to untie your opponent's knot.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it I can't wait to start playing it. It's been the only issue with going to the WTC is I haven't had a chance to try the new rules because I don't want them sitting in my head overriding stuff from Mark 3. As soon as the WTC is done, I look forward to jamming a heap of games with Mark 4.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Well, that is a glowing recommendation. Um, and I kind of don't want to overwrite that with anything else. So I think that's probably where we should leave it. Do you have any shout outs to anyone who might be watching?
Shout out to Gav Woodrow for always buying the latest medalist, regardless of the game. Never change.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. In the next episode, if you could call it that, we have Dan Nads Tacken about going to his first WTC. But thank you so much for coming on, Josh, and best of luck over at the WTC.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Okay, guys, until next time, see ya.